I mean, I'm sure you've heard this a lot, Steve, but Small Axe is a remarkable collection of films, stories told in the most brilliant way. So congratulations for those, and thanks for giving those stories to us. I wanted to begin really just with the music before anything else. I wanted to speak about the kind of choices. I'm interested in the kind of precision that went into picking them and the enjoyment that you had while picking them, because Small Axe almost feels like a kind of record or an EP, and I just wondered what that process was like for you.
Well, very much so. A prime example of that is, I imagine, Lovers Rock. And I planned it in a way of how the DJ would lay down the tracks and how the narrative sort of accelerated from there. First, you've got the sort of music, which is basically what happened often in these booze parties was about getting the women in order to sort of dance. Basically, what I mean by that is it makes sweet music, meaning that a lot of the dub and heavy reggae the women weren't really interested in, but it was more the American soul music. So Lovers Rock in a way was a British version, a Jamaican British version, West Indian version of that kind of sweet soul music. So it's about laying down the foundation of sort of getting people sort of warmed up, and then kung fu dancing, everyone could enjoy that as such. I think the guys were a little bit too sort of, they didn't want to seem sort of soft in a way of dancing to this sort of soul music, and then ramp it up from there. And of course, until we get to sort of Kunti Kente, the dub, when everything is sort of let loose as such.
Yeah, because I was wondering, I mean, obviously more so than the others, it did feel like the kind of music was more essential to the narrative in Lovers Rock. And it felt like I was on a night out, like the best night out I've been on for years. In fact, I wanted to say thank you for introducing me to Darling Ooh by Errol Dunkley, because that's a fantastic track. But I just wondered, Jay, did you choose the music before the screenplay was written? Because it did almost feel like the story followed the tracks.
Well, myself and Courtney Newland, I mean, the first track, I mean, for me, this Lovers Rock was a fairy tale. Okay, it was about my aunt, leaving my grandmother's house in Shutterbush and going to Labrador Grove because she was never allowed to go. So my uncle would leave the back door open. So it was a Cinderella story, that magical night out, and then you come back and the coach turns into a pumpkin, and the horse turns back into mice. So it was about that sort of choosing of the tune. And the first thing when I decided I wanted to make a movie about Lovers Rock or those blues parties, it was always that Janet Kay tune. It was always that tune. It was just one of those things where, Silly Games was just the sort of anthem in a way. And also all the way through of Small Axe, when you think of Mangrove, when you think of that sort of that time of ska, and the Rude Boys, and the mods, and the skinheads that turned into that kind of skinheads and mods, and it's kind of interesting, that kind of equation in a way of British history, and also British Black history, British youth cult history, and the West Indian and Jamaican sort of influence, and that trajectory from Mangrove. You get to Skinheads, Moonstomp. You get all kinds of interesting sort of, fusions of culture.
I grew up in Westbourne Park, so just near sort of Ladbroke Grove, and where the kind of parties like that took place. In fact, this sort of reminds me of my childhood. I used to go to a couple of parties a bit like that with my friends and their parents when I was like 10 years old. I remember once I was there dancing along, and there was this chorus of "Go White Boy, Go White Boy," and I started singing along, and then realised that I was the only white boy in the room. And I can say I wasn't, after that I turned a deep shade of red, but it just made it was a really nostalgic experience for me and touched me in a way that nothing has for a long time, Lovers Rock. I just wondered if that was the case for you. Was it quite a nostalgic experience making it or writing it?
It's not just about Lovers Rock in a way. It's about, again, it's a celebration. And I understand that, and I understand the enthusiasm. But I have to sort of, in order to get to Lovers Rock, we have to go through Mangrove. In order to get to Lovers Rock and maintain Lovers Rock, we have to get to Red, White, and Blue. In order for there to be a second generation of those kind of things, we have to have an education and an Alex Weatle. So, it's kind of interesting in some ways that we talk about that movie, and I get it, and I appreciate it. But in order for me even to talk to you today, I had to sort of have a situation where, a real understanding of that journey. So it's about the collective of Small Axe. It's about sort of Shaun Parkes' amazing performance in in Mangrove, it's about these amazing sort of new people who came into equation. I mean, all these people never had been in front of a camera before, and it's about all of that. It's about all of that.
Yeah, I mean, Mangrove, I was going to ask you a question about as well, which is I remember when I go back to my parents who still live in the area, I'm always kind of struck and this quite saddened by the Grenfell Towers still standing in the landscape. I just wondered about having that kind of looming over the set when you were shooting Mangrove. Was that quite a profound reminder in some ways of the struggle that still exists and how people in this country are still not being protected by the establishment?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's ongoing, unfortunately, ongoing. Interestingly, in that part of the world, I mean, I see your flag behind you. No blacks, no Irish, no dogs. Look, Small Axe was all about a collective. It's all about us, whoever we are, coming together and changing things. Individuals, we could do so much, but as a collective, we could do so much. So with Grenfell standing over us and other things, which have continued to happen, not just in London but throughout the country, you have to continue to make noise about it, and to sort of bring people to task, as there's amazing people did with the Mangrove 9 and with it, and those parents and those black parents and educators who actually changed the law. Which demolished schools for the so-called educationally subnormal. I mean, that would have been my path. I mean, like in education, I put my narrative within that narrative of the 70s. I grew up in the 80s, and so I didn't have to go through that. But the only reason why I didn't have to go through that because of those people. But I want to remind myself and others that this could have been someone like my journey, and it has been other people's journeys.
You mentioned Shaun Parkes, so I was lucky enough to interview back in Mangrove when it first aired. I mean, this is like a who's who of brilliant Black British acting talent. Was that one of the joys for you to be able to give such a wealth of great characters and opportunities to actors who deserve them, can often be overlooked? I mean, and that also applies to those working behind the scenes as well.
Absolutely, because what we had with an apprenticeship scheme where every department had at least one or two people working with each individual, with each department. Because at the end of the day, there's enough talk. Let's just get on with it. Let's just do it. So that was a joy, but also that was happening behind the camera. But also in front of the camera, we had talent that had never been in front of, Amira from Lovers Rock, for example. We had Kenya. This amazing 11-year-old kid who was acting in education, et cetera, et cetera. So it's about, people who've already been there, like Shaun, who had never really been given an opportunity like this and who basically just killed it, as well as other people. Again, we have people like John Boyega, who's more established, but doing something that he's never done before. I mean, I think he would look at, his performance. I mean, that's like something he's never had done before. It's just about showing our full potential emotionally, and in a way, in order to sort of see the sort of narrative which is just presented in front of us, in order to sort of go forward and further than we have ever before, because it's there. It's just all they need is a job,
Yeah, I was wondering too about how important it was for you to explore the kind of Black British experience, because it's not just an American problem, is it? I mean, perhaps we don't explore these themes enough in our industry, because if you look at films that kind of tackle race and institutionalized racism, they're often in America. So was that another kind of thing that pushed you to wanting to tell these stories, was to show that it's something that goes on over here as well?
Well, I'm not interested in something that goes on over here as well. These stories have been told already, but they never begin light of day. The only reason why these stories haven't been sort of, or not even these stories, or just Black British films, they could be comedies, they could be whatever they want to be, haven't been sort of prevalent, is because people have not been welcome in the British film and television industry. They just haven't been welcome, because if they were, we would have seen them. If they were, we would have had a whole breadth of different sort of ways of seeing people of color in different characters and different forms, not just about sort of films of discrimination. Not at all. It's about someone brushing his teeth and slipping on a banana. I don't know, anything surreal or whatever, or comedy or not. So it's about that. The only reason we haven't had these situations so prevalently, because we have had them, Horace Andres and people like that have done it. But it's one of those things where it hasn't been so prominent because people have not been welcome within the industry. Fact. And also, if I can add on one thing, because also there's so much talent within that. so much wonderful talent that, you know, that could be shared. And yeah, it just never got light of day. But I hope we've changed things now.
Yeah. Do you think? Do you hoping that the Small Axe series could? I mean, obviously, it was going beyond the fact it's just brilliant films and brilliant TV. I mean, are you hoping it could have a real sort of progressive impact on the future of British film, on the British film industry?
Let's see what happens. I mean, the fact that you're trying to make the best films as you possibly can. That's what I try to do with the money you have at hand and the time you have. So let's see if anything else comes out of it. Let's see. I mean, the response we've had from around the world has been absolutely amazing. So that's one thing. So again, it's for us to sort of see if we can continue to tell stories like this and others.
I mean, of course, I'm sure when you make sort of art or make films, you make them for yourselves or for audiences. But I read you really wanted to make something here that your mum could watch. Is she often on your mind when you make films and your art? Are you thinking about what she'd like to see? Or was that particularly just the case with this one?
If I did, I'd be kind of embarrassed. So no. Oh my God, I can't do that, Mum. But no. This was particularly because I wanted to her and others to have the easy accessibility to these stories. That you can switch on your TV onto BBC One and see them, and it comes into your home. So that's what it was about. It was like a generosity and a possibility of having these situations, these stories come directly into your home. So yeah, it was an immediateness. And yes, I wanted my mother to sort of, and others and relatives of mine, people I knew, to see their stories, which are just as important as anyone else's, as well as people living in Buckingham Palace, as well as other situations. It's important that people get their story told,
Yeah, I was wondering about how important your mum's feedback is to you, because I don't know about you, but my parents' feedback on my work is sometimes the only feedback I care about, although that may be because they always tell me they like it.
I know in this particular case, yes, it was important because it was authenticity. And my aunt and other relatives and friends, it was always about the authenticity of what we were doing, and that was quite amazing because we had a screening in the London Film Festival of Mangrove and Lovers Rock, and obviously when COVID happened, that's the only thing we could do, and it closed down afterwards. But when they saw the screenings, they were kind of emotional that they saw themselves, within those films, particularly Mangrove, and it's just amazing because people had to live through that. People had to live through that.
When creating and telling these stories in the Small Axe series, did the experience of doing this connect you even more so to your own heritage?
Yeah, absolutely. Because in some ways, it's a kind of reflection on you, but also it's an investigation in you. It's a kind of you're sort of going backwards, obviously, to sort of have some idea of where we're at. Going backwards in some ways to sort of going to the past in order to sort of have an understanding of the future. So that was very interesting. That was kind of it was very revealing in a way, and it was good medicine. It was good medicine, and again, it was just also my appreciation of the Black community, which has the West Indian community, which has not really got a certain kind of the credit that it deserves. I mean, not just for the things that they did for the West Indian community and Black community in itself, but also for the wider, broader public. In popular culture, in the justice system, in education. Within sport, it's incredible, and and you look at the numbers of people, it's a handful, but the amount of impact these people we have made has been, Britain will never be the same, ever.
I was going to, I mean, it's obviously deservedly won Best Picture from the LA critics, which opened up a conversation on what Small Axe is on Twitter. I wondered if you perceive it as one piece of work or that could win a kind of Best Picture. And secondly, my second part of that question is, does it really matter how we perceive it, or is it a futile debate, despite the fact I've just asked you that question?
Well, I'm not a critic. I'm a maker, and however they want to sort of categorize it or frame it, fine. But this was always for television. This was always a television limited series. This is what it was. Because at the same time, I've always said that I wanted my mother to have easy access. So it had to happen on television or streaming platforms. So that was it. So, it was always on the BBC. And yeah.
Well, my final question, because I realize I'm running out of time, it's a sort of quick question, really. But I know you can see it slightly in the education, but I read somewhere you were a huge Spurs fan and have since been able to give them up. Have you got any advice to a long-suffering fan like myself? Because I quite like to follow your lead.
I don't think, unfortunately, and I don't mean it rudely, unfortunately, you never give up. I mean, I had to stop because it was sort of, tainting my day. I mean, I get upset, miserable because your team lost or whatever. I said, like, you know what, I'm invested. I just sort of try and, walk away. So I'm a sort of Spurs recovering addict as such. So it's just difficult, isn't it? I mean, cool. I can't. I used to look at the score draw and invest so much. I couldn't do it. Arguing with my partner because my team lost. No, that has to stop.
Yeah.
So there you go.
I think I'm going to follow your lead on that one. Well, thank you so much.
I don't know. I don't want to discourage anyone from supporting Tottenham. If we could play the game how it should be played, then we should be all right. Never mind.
Yeah.
All right.
I agree with that. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Steve. It's been a real pleasure. And
my pleasure.
For the Small Axe and everything you've done. It's always been great.
Very kind. Thank you. Take care.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys.
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey You Guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey